I know that many of you would say the same of your family, but in my case, it's actually true. My daughter is movie star beautiful. And I say that with a certain shameless pride because I clearly made no genetic contribution to my very Asian daughter's appearance. She is movie star beautiful, but she is not perfect. A fact which seems to often get lost in the eyes of people who are easily starstruck by beauty. As an Asian in a 96% white school system, she stood out, and I believe both her school peers and her teachers tended to just sort of give her a pass on assignments and expectations because people liked her, wanted her to like them. And before I adopted her, before I got a little rock star living in my house, I'd never had reason to think about what the negative aspects or the downside of being beautiful might be. But when friends come too easily, when success is almost guaranteed, you can start to assume that the world owes you kindness and generosity, that you always deserve the best seat, the first place in line, and you can therefore afford to be dismissive of anyone who mildly irritates you for any reason. We had several conversations in the process of both of us growing up, I guess I should fairly say, about the minimum expectation of life, that if someone is being nice to you, the very minimum expectation of the universe is that you be at least kind to them in response. Now, boys will fight, vandalize, tear stuff up, and generally, I was one of 3 boys in my family. I understand boys will generally test the boundaries of civilization. They literally have to be reminded to put the seat up and to hit the hole. You know, they're just basics of life that boys have to be reminded of over and over and over again. But girls will verbally cannibalize each other. When all of her very pretty friends from her cheerleading squad were over for a sleepover, I often found myself thanking God that I was not one of the people in their school that they were dissecting. Few things made me more proud as a father as when I heard her chiming in to defend one of her peers who was being unfairly treated. When she went to college, and naturally she joined the pretty girls sorority, I was proud when, as an upperclassman, she defended the candidacy of young freshmen who were not attractive, who had weight problems or complexion problems, or who didn't have the resources to have nice clothes. You see, you literally set a value on a human being as if they were slaves on an auction block. You set a value on what that person is worth by what it takes for you to dismiss them. When you think about people that you have removed from your circle of friends, that you have dismissed from your life, you have placed a value on that friendship. And what's shocking, I think what oftentimes hurts so much about being rejected by someone is you realize that their value that they placed on you was infinitesimally small, that it was next to nothing for which they were willing to throw you under the bus. Now, when I was a kid, one of the most popular movies was this really syrupy, sad film called Love Story. And perhaps the single most quoted line from any movie in those days, and probably most of you could say it with me: love means never having to say you're sorry. I was no Einstein, but even as a young kid, I knew that was a load of baloney. I grew up as the youngest of 4 kids in a family that was, as Elizabeth Warren has recently described her own childhood, on the ragged edge of the middle class. Resources, both financial and emotional, were scarce. My parents even were not really great at handing out affection and affirmation, so it was scarce. So there was vicious competition between me and my brothers and my sister. And we did not always fight fair. Remaining in a relationship, whether that's a marriage, a family relationship, a friendship, work associates, neighbors, means being willing to say, I'm sorry. It means choosing to be grateful for kindnesses that have been shown to you. It means learning the relationship skills of not simply taking other people for granted, not abusing them and assuming that it is their job to just take it off of you and to pretend that the next day it didn't even happen because you're so special. You're the cute girl in middle school who deserves extra grace in every circumstance. Humans are pack animals. One of the most cruel forms of punishment in any prison system is solitary confinement. We don't do well alone. We do not do well without other people in our lives. And again, thinking of a prison system, you even do better being around criminals than being around no one. The famous Trappist monk, Thomas Merton, ended up living as a hermit for several years on the grounds of the Gethsemane Monastery. His abbot agreed to let him live in this little stone hermitage rather than in the monastic house with the rest of the monks because he said that Merton was the most difficult person to get along with that he'd ever known. So it was a relief to the rest of the community for this very famous author and speaker to go out into the woods and stay in a cabin. Yet Merton wrote in his journal, while he was living in that cabin, he wrote, "Love is our true destiny. We do not find the meaning of life by ourselves alone. We find it with another person." I find the ability to maintain meaningful friendships, family relationships, marriages, and sibling relationships to be one of the real casualties of our modern era. Our mobile population, with so many forms of entertainment and distraction and myriad methods of speaking to one another, in many ways, has turned us all into the pretty girl in school who can afford to be mean to people whenever we want to. I live alone. I work alone. Other than public services and counseling appointments, it would be entirely possible for me to spend days on end without ever having a face-to-face interaction with anybody. But I have hundreds of channels on TV. I have podcasts, I have videos that approximate human voices and interactions. I have hundreds of friends on Facebook and thousands of viewers on YouTube and iTunes, and I correspond with many of them online. Still, I feel the existential reality of my own isolation, and I am shocked by how very fragile that human connections really are. In the 21st century, it is possible to dismiss people that you have had regular contact with and lots of reason to believe that you are close friends for the most venial reasons imaginable. Most of you know that this Wednesday's Springfield News Leader will be the last time that my column will appear on a regular basis in the paper. I really wasn't ready to give it up, even though I've been writing for 20 years. And during that 20 years, I have been the most vilified liberal writer in the state of Missouri. Because the media contact with the people of Springfield has been a very meaningful outlet for me. It's allowed me to keep important things in public conversation. When people would say to me, "I enjoy writing your articles," I often replied, "I have to write those articles or my head would explode. I have to be able to get those thoughts out. So I'll find another." But that long chapter of my life, most of my adult life, comes to an end on Wednesday. Still, I'm realizing that the drumbeat of hate mail, and especially the vicious comments posted every week in the newspaper's online comment area, has been a real burden to me. It has been poisoning me. I never gained the discipline to just not look. Lots of you would say, if a letter comes and it doesn't have a return address, don't open it. Don't go online and read what people are saying about your column. but I was never able to do that. I was, like a cat drawn to a catnip mouse. And you just have this frenzy. And then when you finally break away, you look and you hope nobody saw you. You hope nobody was aware of what a fool you made out of yourself in the way you were interacting with those. But I was never able to just walk away from what they were saying. I'm no saint, but even a saint has limited supplies of patience and thick-skinned endurance. So I believe that for a lot of the past generation, I've walked around with most of my supply of patience and generous kindness, probably a quart low or so, because it's always used up by these strangers making hostile comments online. So I'm going to make a conscious goal to be a better friend, a more patient and a more tolerant person, and more naturally forgiving as I unplug from all of the hatred and hostility that has been coming my way from the media. But, like when it comes to weight loss, I will not likely appreciate being reminded of this goal or being offered unsolicited advice about how to do it. So let's just stay friends, can we? Our gospel lesson for today comes from the Gospel of John. And I usually avoid reading John in our services because the Jesus that John describes is the most magical and the least human image of Jesus in the Bible. At the end of the first century, John is at pains to describe Jesus in a way that elevates him and makes him sound more important and more powerful and more divine than any of the competing religions in Palestine and in the Roman world at that time. So he has Jesus in these exaggerated walking on water scenes, miracle healings, magical transformation of water into wine. His resurrection stories make Jesus out to be God, and that places him beyond meaningful connection to us. But there's something about this story that I really just can't let go of. This Jesus whom John describes as being able to give sight to the blind, to feed the multitudes, even to raise the dead, comes to see his disciples after his own miraculous resurrection, and he gives them a magical power. And I would go so far as to say that it really is a magical power. A power given to the apostles, and by the way it's written, of course, all the apostles are dead, so he's not really talking about the apostles, he's talking about us. John says that Jesus breathed on them, and breath is a symbol of life force or spirit, the Ruach Elohim in Hebrew, the Spirit of God. Jesus breathes on them and says, receive the Holy Spirit. Now, if you forgive the sins of anyone, they are forgiven. Now, if ever there was going to be a time that you were going to take the Gospel of John literally, I would beg you to do it right here. You have the power to forgive sins. You just have to be willing to do it. You have the power to heal broken relationships. You have the power to restore estranged and strained family ties. You have the ability to end hostilities, to give strength, confidence, and renewed ability to your own children, if you will choose to forgive. Marriages don't have to run out of love. Sisters and brothers do not have to become estranged. Friendships do not have to die because of time or distance. You never have to throw a coworker under the bus. You do not have to give rein to your bad moods that give you permission to abuse the people that are near you. The French poet Ananias Nin wrote, "Love never dies a natural death. It dies because we don't know how to replenish its source. It dies of blindness and errors and betrayals. It dies of illness and wounds. It dies of weariness, of witherings, and of tarnishings." So remember the source of what made you fall in love. Remember the common bonds that first drew you into friendship. The shared vision of justice and compassion and love that drew us together. And do not forget to use your magical powers for good. Forgive, Be the first one to forgive. Forgive generously. Forgive recklessly. Forgive as if you were divine.
You've been watching a progressive Christian video from the Community Christian Church of Springfield, Missouri. We encourage our viewers to donate to our efforts in feeding the homeless and hungry of our community. Write to us at reverenddray@aol.com for more information.